In the previous part, we talked about containers and reviewed the components of a container together. In this section, we want to get familiar with the different types of containers. Stay with me. The classification of containers in terms of size and dimensions, which we divide into 5 categories. 10-foot container, 20-foot container, 20-foot heavy-duty container, 40-foot container, and 40-foot high cube container, which we will explain in detail in the next slide. One point we need to know about containers is that a 40-foot container is twice as long as a 20-foot container, and a 20-foot container is twice as long as a 10-foot container. Now let's talk about the dimensions of containers in this slide. A 10-foot container has dimensions of 2.5 by 3 meters with a height of 2.6 meters. It's known as the 3-meter container and is mostly considered a suitable option for storing goods and it's not commonly used in international transportation and isn't used very much. A standard 20-foot container has dimensions of 2.5 by 6 meters, as you can see. Its length is twice that of the 10-foot container and its height is the same as the 10-foot one. The height is 2.6 meters, and as mentioned here, it's also used for storing goods. However, it is heavily used in the transportation of goods and is very common and widespread. The 20-foot heavy-duty container has the same dimensions as the standard 20-foot container. That means it has the same dimensions of 2.5 by 6 meters with a height of 2.6 meters. But its body structure and material are different from the standard 20-foot container, and it has a sturdier structure compared to the regular 20-foot container. It is used for transporting heavy and bulky goods. There are 40-foot containers or regular 40-foot containers, also known as DC or standard containers. These are used for transporting normal goods or general cargo. Its dimensions should be 2.5 by 12. As you can see, its length is twice that of a 20-foot container, and its height is 260. This container is relatively more common and widespread compared to other containers, and the last type of container we have is the 40-foot high cube, which doesn't differ in length and width from the regular 40-foot container. But its height is about 30 centimeters taller than a regular 40-foot container, as you can see. A regular 40-foot container has a height of 2.60 meters, but a 40-foot high cube container is 2.90 meters tall. These containers are mostly used for transporting goods that are tall and whose height is such that they do not fit in a regular 40-foot container. In this section, we have the classification of containers based on their usage. As you can see, they are divided into a wide variety of types: general cargo or standard containers, which are also called normal containers, refrigerated containers or reefers, and open side containers or open containers. Flat rack containers, open top containers, open side containers, open top, open side containers, insulated containers, which are specially designed to maintain the temperature of their contents, ventilated containers that allow for the circulation of air, heated containers used to keep goods warm, tank containers or ISO tank containers for transporting liquids and gases, collapsible flat rack containers that can be folded when not in use, platform containers for oversized cargo, and containers specifically designed for transporting livestock, animals, and vehicles. Each serve unique and important roles in the shipping and logistics industry. In this lesson, we're going to review each of these container types one by one, exploring their features, uses, and significance in global trade. A normal container used for transporting standard and regular goods. These containers are the most common type used in transportation today. And typically, a 20-foot container can carry up to 22 tons, while a 40-foot container can carry up to 26 tons. They have this loading capacity. Of course, this weight also depends on the loading policy of the shipping company that owns these containers. It depends and also on the weight indicated on the CSC plate of the container, which I covered in the previous lesson. I mentioned that it's very important for us to check what number is shown on the CSC plate for the gross weight because we are only allowed to load the container up to that limit. There's also another type of 20-foot container, which is called a 20-foot HD or heavy duty. This type of container differs from the standard 20-foot container in that its body and floor are made of stronger and more durable materials, making its structure more robust compared to a regular 20-foot container. Therefore, these containers are used for loading goods that are heavy and very weighty. For example, stone, which a regular 20-foot container cannot withstand the weight of. If you load this cargo into it, the container floor might give way. That's why you always see that for transporting stone and similar goods, heavy-duty 20-foot containers are used. Refrigerated containers or reefer containers, which you may often see abbreviated as RF in many places. These are containers that usually come in two sizes, 20 foot and 40 foot. They are also called refrigerated containers, equipped with cooling systems and insulated, and are mostly used for transporting perishable goods or items that require a specific temperature during transport. These containers must be checked in the container yard before any goods are loaded into them. In special areas equipped with electrical systems, they should be connected to power, and the area and the inside of the container should be prepared for transporting the goods that are to be loaded, and the temperature should be set accordingly. This preparation process before loading, which is done for these containers, then is called PTI, which you've probably heard mentioned quite often. For example, in the case of refrigerated containers, the cost of PTI, which stands for pre-trip inspection, is such and such, and this process is sometimes carried out by the cargo owner's representative themselves and sometimes by the shipping company's representative on behalf of the cargo owner. And the cost is collected from the cargo owner. It's very important that this process is definitely carried out. In those special warehouses, the container is prepared for loading. In places where access to electricity isn't possible, there are special generators available. They're called gen sets, which can be connected to the refrigerated container so that it can supply the necessary electricity to keep the container running and in fact keep the goods inside the container safe and sound. Side open or open containers. The side container is a container that has a door on one side, and as you can see in the image, it has two doors, which gives it advantages compared to a normal container. First, it allows for maximum use of the container's volume. Because of the way both doors open like this, it makes loading easier and the loading process takes less time. And it can also accommodate very large or oversized goods. The open-top container is a type of container similar to a regular container. The first type is used for transporting bulky goods. The difference is that its top is open, it doesn't have a roof, and special tarpaulins are used to cover it. The side walls of this container are made of corrugated steel, and its floor is wooden. These containers are mostly used for transporting goods with undefined packaging, like sand, gravel, grains, and the like. They are also used for certain goods that might need to be loaded from the top. Open top, side open, or open top, open side containers. It's a container that, like both the open top and the side open containers, can have its own specific uses, and in fact, it's a combination of both types. So it can serve the purposes of an open top container as well as those of a side open container. Insulated containers are containers whose bodies are made of insulating materials. This is to prevent coal from turning into heat or to stop heat from entering them. These containers are mostly used for transporting pharmaceuticals, frozen meat, and similar goods. Ventilated containers are specialized containers that are used for transporting goods or materials which need proper ventilation in order to prevent spoilage. For example, transporting goods like coffee or beans specifically requires the use of ventilated containers. This has led to ventilated containers being commonly known as coffee containers, heated containers. These containers, in addition to having insulation in their walls and ceiling, are also equipped with a heating unit. As you can see, they are essentially the opposite of refrigerated containers. That is, inside refrigerated containers, goods that must not spoil were transported. They had to be kept in a cool environment, and these containers were used for that purpose. And here, on the contrary, goods that need to be kept in a warm environment for preservation are involved. They must be transported using heated containers. Tank containers or ISO tanks are used for transporting liquids, whether ordinary or hazardous, as well as gases. These types of containers are used for such purposes. Their bodies can be single-walled or double-walled, and in terms of value, they are among the most expensive types of containers. And because of the risk that the material being transported can pose to them, They are actually very important and are classified as special containers. An ISO tank consists of a 20-foot container frame with a tank placed inside it. As you can see in the illustration, that is in terms of dimensions, the frame in which the tank is placed, its dimensions are similar to a 20-foot container, a special shape. This frame allows the ISO tank to be transported in various ways, such as by road, rail, and sea. These are called tank containers. They are used to transport hazardous and non-hazardous materials such as liquefied gases, flammable substances, corrosive materials, chemicals, and so on, and toxic substances. Foldable containers or flat rack containers are types of containers that are used very rarely. Since they take up very little space, in fact, they have no walls or roof, and they are mainly used for cargo that is very large in size and volume. You could say they are oversized and bigger than standard container dimensions, or their height is much greater. For such goods, foldable or flat rack containers are used. A flat container, or what is called a platform container, is one where the cargo is loaded onto its bottom surface, and then using various tools like ropes and similar equipment, the cargo is secured on it and then it becomes ready for transport and handling. This type of container is mostly used for transporting heavy items and machinery, as well as iron and steel that are oversized. These are considered out-of-gauge cargo. They're very large, and in fact, this container, since it has no walls or roof and has no such limitations in these respects. These oversized and out-of-gauge cargoes can be loaded with this type of container and actually be secured on it. Here you can see a container specifically designed for transporting livestock and animals, which has vents along its length and width. These vents actually allow for air circulation, and in fact, there are vents for the animals to breathe, and also these same vents are used for transporting the animal. Additionally, there are special vents at the bottom for cleaning, as well as for providing water and food to feed the animal. A container specifically designed for transporting vehicles. It's a container used for transporting automobiles over long distances, and in terms of international standards, it has height restrictions, and its length is such that if the container is 20 feet, it can carry one car, and if it's 40 feet, it can carry two cars inside. As we mentioned before, the length of a 40-foot container is twice that of a 20-foot container. Finally, we have the classification of containers based on ownership, which is divided into two categories, COC and SOC. COC containers or carrier-owned containers are containers that are part of the assets of shipping lines, and in fact they serve as the container in which the goods are placed. After the goods are delivered to the recipient at the destination, the recipient is required to unload the goods and return the container to the shipping line within the standard 10-day period that is defined by most shipping lines. But if those 10 days pass and the container is not returned, then, according to the tariffs that each shipping line has for itself or that are defined by the shipping association, the recipient must pay the demurrage fee to the shipping line for the extra days they kept the container in their possession. Or if any damage is caused to the container during unloading, or if the container is damaged, they must definitely pay the necessary repair costs for the container to the shipping line. Why? Because the container belongs to the shipping line and is actually held in trust by the client. An SOC or shipper-owned container is a container that is part of the sender's assets and is actually sold to the buyer along with the cargo. Once it leaves, it is not supposed to return. It goes with the goods and is sold to the buyer along with the cargo. In this case, the container is not only the final packaging for the goods, but it is also considered part of the shipment itself. And the receiver must also declare it in the customs declaration and then proceed with the process. They must clear it through customs as well. These containers are also not subject to demurrage charges. So the difference between COC and SOC is that the SOC container, in short, it is itself a part of the shipment. It is considered as goods, treated like goods, declared as goods, and can be delivered to the buyer along with the goods. It is cleared through customs, does not return, and is not subject to demurrage charges either.